because it is our responsibility. Honorable Speaker, around 986 billion Kenya shillings is actually going to CFS, because we are very categorical about allocating enough resources to offset loans, so that, Honorable Speaker, we do not continue on the whole of borrowing, but we actually bury the hole by allocating as much money as possible in terms of repayment of debts. And that is why in the kitty of CFS, we allocated Kenya shillings 986 billion. Honorable Speaker, we have also increased the allocations to our counties. The equitable share, we enhanced from 370 billion to 385 billion Kenya shillings. Honorable Speaker, I know there have been issues with the exchequer, but Honorable Speaker, this has been most because of the jittery markets we have, and especially across foreign markets, which we have not been able to realize the monies we had anticipated to borrow for the last financial year. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, we had to resort to domestic markets, where again we are paying a premium in terms of interest rates. So the issues that has been there in terms of exchequer, they need interventions, not policies, and we have been doing that. Honorable Speaker, as I wind up, just again to put the record straight, we allocated the entire allocation of 2.3 billion Kenya shillings for the national government. Honorable Speaker, 27.4% of that amount we allocated to education, out of which we have doubled allocation to health. We have also, Honorable Speaker, increased capitation for JSS by 10 billion Kenya shillings, Honorable Speaker. Something else I would want to highlight as I come to the close. All the members here who have constructed KMTCs through NGCDF, there are 21 of them that are not functional. We have allocated 1 billion Kenya shillings into KMTC to hire additional lecturers and staff. We have also allocated monies to operationalize all the 21, Honorable Speaker, KMTCs. There are 181 markets that were started by former President Mwai Kibaki through the ESP program. Honorable Speaker, we have allocated 3 billion Kenya shillings for all the entire 181 markets, so that Kenyans can start realizing the utility of those markets. Honorable Speaker, just again for members to be...
Junet, order. What is the point of order, Junet?
Speaker, I wanted to bring to the attention of the Chair Budget Committee that, Mr. Speaker, doing the appropriation is one thing, but having the real money is another thing, Mr. Speaker. He has sold here a rosy, Mr. Speaker, a heavenly affair that we have given 1 billion to this man, 2 billion to that lady. But, Mr. Speaker, what is the level of absorption, Mr. Speaker? Will this money really come to the...
He is an optimist, you are a pessimist. That makes the
Honorable Speaker, in answering Honorable Junet, as I started the moving of this bill, if you realized, I actually took the first minutes to talk about the supplementary estimates too. It was deliberate. It was deliberate to show that there are only marginal changes that you are making to the budget you are exiting. And we also anticipate to have actually almost no changes in the budget of 2023-2024, because we have been very modest, we have been very realistic in the projection of revenues. But as I come to the close, Honorable Speaker, it is good to also highlight that we allocated Kenya shillings, 5 billion Kenya shillings to fertilizer subsidy, so that our farmers, and I want to assure the farmers of Kenya from this house, that as we go to the next season, both the small season and the other one, Honorable Speaker, the Kenyan farmers will be buying fertilizer at a cheaper price than they bought last season, Honorable Speaker, because we have allocated enough monies for the subsidy. Honorable Speaker, there are very many other good things that we have allocated in that budget, 250 billion Kenya shillings in terms of roads, and also, Honorable Speaker, an unprecedented amount of figure or funds that will be going to power and especially rural electrification. Honorable Speaker, as we move forward, we'll be seeking to enlarge our revenue bracket, Honorable Speaker, by especially necessitating the MDAs that can collect A in A to be able to optimize, Honorable Speaker, and you are already doing that through the allocations and also through policies. Honorable Speaker, I wish to thank all members who have taken part, and I wish and I beg to reply. Thank you very much.
I now wish to put the question, which is the Appropriations Bill, National Assembly Bill number 27 of 2023, be now read the second time. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Those of the contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to authorize the issuance of a sum of money out of the consolidated fund and its application towards the service of the year ending on the 30th June 2024, and to appropriate the sum and a sum voted on account by the National Assembly for certain public services and purposes.
Next order. Yes, Honorable Mbadi, what is the issue?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I realized that the second order in the order paper is going to be the Committee of the Whole House on the Finance Bill.
We've not reached there yet.
Mr. Speaker, I was raising it because I know once you call for the Committee of the House is supposed to adjourn. But I wanted to raise this point over there so that I get your ruling on this matter, Mr. Speaker, so that when we move to the Committee of the Whole House, then the matters will have been dispensed with. Mr. Speaker, if you allow me.
Right.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, this House has set traditions before. The Speaker has ruled that matters of constitutionality, matters of legality, and matters of procedure, Mr. Speaker, can be raised at any time in the course of debating a bill. Mr. Speaker, Article 259 actually speaks to the interpretation of the Constitution, and that it should be done in a manner that would promote its purposes, values, principles, and advance the rule of law and contribute to good governance. Mr. Speaker, our standing order is actually a creation, or standing orders are a creation of our Constitution.
Order, Honorable Mbadi. Order. Take your seat. The matter you are raising was actually raised by the distinguished member for Arieda on Thursday. I promised to give a response to it, and I have a ruling I want to deliver on it. So you're actually flogging a dead horse. It is a matter that is already on Hansard, and the Honorable Otienda Amolo prosecuted it very well. I can see you just headed the same direction, so I will stop you there and allow me to move on to give my response to what Honorable Otienda Amolo raised. Order, honorable members. First, I bring to your attention, honorable members, to the availability of a supplementary order paper that should be circulated. The reason I'm told, because we have members' amendments to the finance bill, some that were received late, out of time, but were accommodated, because they wanted to accommodate as many of you as we can. So you can look at the supplementary order paper, and from here we'll proceed on the basis of that. I have got a ruling and a communication to make. Thereafter, the majority leader will move a procedural motion to extend your sitting time. And given the enormity and the interest in the matter of the finance bill, House Business Committee today directed that where possible, today you'll sit up to the end of the day. Tomorrow morning we'll put aside, pardon? It is out of order to speak to the chair when the chair is making a communication. We will then tomorrow morning, if we will not have finished with the finance bill, put aside your private members' business to deal with it. If you will not have finished, the end of the day means midnight. That's when the day ends. And if you do not finish, then you have Thursday. Our House Business Committee has directed that if there is need, a procedural motion will be moved for you to sit on Thursday morning up to 1 o'clock, and the afternoon, if possible, up to the end of the day. Should you not finish, then I'll give you further direction. Honorable members, you will recall that during the afternoon sitting of Thursday, 15th June 2023, before the budget presentation by the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury, the Honorable Otienda Amolo, Senior Council MP, rose on a point of order and sought procedural guidance on adherence with the Standing Order 244C with regard to the introduction, consideration and passage of the Finance Bill 2023 by the House. It was the contention of the Honourable Member that Standing Order 244C outlines a particular order requiring the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury to make a pronouncement of the budget policy highlights and revenue-raising measures for the national government and thereafter present a legislative proposal which is published and introduced as a finance bill. According to the member, a strict reading of Standing Order 244C would therefore indicate that the House had jumped the gun by concluding the second reading of the finance bill before the appearance of the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury. Members at the bar, take your seats. The nearest seat. The nearest seat. Honourable members, at the time I did indicate to the Honourable Otienda Amolo that Standing Order 244C had been rendered negatory by a court decision and offered to share the relevant judgment after the sitting. Honourable members, following the budget presentation by the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Economic Planning, I did receive inquiries and representations from several members of the House relating to the matter raised by the Honourable Member for Areda. Given the turn of events, I have decided to issue this particular guidance to the House. Honourable members, from the inquiries and representations received, I have isolated two issues in relation to the consideration of the finance bill that require clarification. These are: one, the effect of the court judgment alluded to in my response to the Honourable Otienda Amolo to the manner of considering and passing of a finance bill, the procedure applicable to the consideration of a finance bill in light of the provisions of Section 39A and 40 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and Standing Order 244C, and the effect of the presentation of the budget statement on the consideration of the finance bill, of a finance bill. With regard to the first issue, the court judgment that I alluded to relates to a matter filed by the Honourable Senator Okiya Omtatah challenging the constitutionality of the Provisional Collection of Taxes and Duties Act. As per the practice obtaining in 2018, the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury would submit a finance bill after the passage of the budget estimates and on the same day that he or she made a budget speech in Parliament. Pursuant to the then Standing Order 245, the House was required to pass a finance bill within 90 days of the passage of an appropriation bill. In the interim, the House would consider and pass a motion operationalizing all the revenue-raising measures proposed in a finance bill for the period between its publication and its passage in line with the provisions in line with the Provisional Collection of Taxes and Duties Act 1959. A point of order raised by the member for Waraka, the Honorable Tom Joseph Kajwang, MP, during the afternoon sitting of the House on 5th July 2018 may have precipitated the matter filed by the Honorable Senator Omtata. At the time, the Honorable Kajwang queried the propriety of operationalizing all the revenue-raising measures proposed in a finance bill in line with the Provisional Collection of Taxes and Duties Act 1959, in light of the provisions of the Constitution and the Public Finance Management Act 2012. The Hansard records that several current members of the House ventilated on the point raised by the Honorable Kajwang then, including the Majority Leader, the Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, MGH MP, the Honorable John Mbadi, and the Honorable Makali Mulu MP. The High Court issued its judgment in Okiya Omtata Okoiti versus Cabinet Secretary, National Treasurer, and three others, 2018 KLR, Kenya Law Reports, on 19 September 2018, and gave the following orders, and I quote: a declaration that by presenting the Finance Bill 2018 to the National Assembly on 14th June 2018, while the financial calendar ends on 30th June 2018, the Cabinet Secretary violated Section 37 of the Public Finance Management Act 2018, which sets the 30th April deadline for the Cabinet Secretary to table the budget estimates and any other bills. Any other bills required to implement the national government budget for approval by the National Assembly. Order, Honorable Women Rep Kisi and your colleague. You are distracting the chair from delivering the ruling. A declaration that the Provisional Collection of Taxes and Duties Act number 44 of 1959, Chapter 415 of the Laws of Kenya is unconstitutional and therefore invalid, null, and void. A declaration that the Finance Bill 2018 or any parts or provisions thereof, including on taxation, cannot be implemented before the bill becomes the Finance Act and it goes through the parliamentary legislative process laid out in the Constitution for approval and adoption by Parliament and assent by the President. Arising from these orders of the Court and ostensibly informed by the debate that ensued on the point raised on the propriety of approving provisional collection of taxes and duties, the House subsequently amended the Public Finance Management Act in July 2019 through Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendment Act 2019 to introduce Section 39A in the Act. The section requires the Cabinet Secretary to submit the Finance Bill before 30th April every year and that it be passed before the end of the financial year on 30th June. The section clarified the manner in which a Finance Bill ought to be introduced, considered and passed by the House. It provides as follows, and I quote: the Cabinet Secretary shall submit to the National Assembly on or before 30th April the Finance Bill setting out the revenue-raising measures for the national government. 2. Following submission of the Finance Bill by the Cabinet Secretary, the relevant committee of the National Assembly shall introduce the bill in the National Assembly. 3. The National Assembly shall consider and pass the Finance Bill with or without amendments in time for it to be presented for assent by 30th June each year. Any recommendations made by the relevant committee of the National Assembly or resolution passed by the National Assembly on revenue matters shall: A, ensure that the total amount of revenue raised is consistent with the approved fiscal framework. B, take into account the principles of equity, certainty, and ease of collection. C, consider the impact of the proposed changes on the composition of the tax revenue with reference to direct and indirect taxes. D, consider domestic, regional, and international tax trends. E, consider the impact on development, investment, employment, and economic growth. F, take into account the recommendations of the Cabinet Secretary as provided under Article 114 of the Constitution. and G, take into account the taxation and all other tariff arrangements and obligations that the Kenya has ratified, including taxation and tariff arrangements under the East African Community Treaty. This leads us to the second issue of an apparent variance in the provision of Standing Order 244C and the dictates of the judgment and the provisions of the Public Finance Management Act 2012. Honorable members, as I had indicated, my attention was drawn to the existence of an apparent variance in the provisions of Section 39A and Section 40 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 with regard to the manner of introduction and consideration of a finance bill. Section 40 of the Act provides as follows. Each financial year, the Cabinet Secretary shall, with the approval of Cabinet, make a public pronouncement of the budget policy highlights and revenue-raising measures for the national government. 2. In making the pronouncement under Section 1, the Cabinet Secretary shall take into account any regional or international agreements that Kenya has ratified, including the East African Community Treaty, and where such agreements prescribe the date when the budget policy highlights and revenue-raising measures are to be pronounced, the Cabinet Secretary shall ensure that the measures are pronounced on the appointed date. On the same date that the budget policy highlights and revenue-raising measures are pronounced, the Cabinet Secretary shall submit to Parliament a legislative proposal setting out the revenue-raising measures for the national government together with a policy statement expounding on those measures. Following the submission of the legislative proposal of the Cabinet Secretary, the relevant committee of the National Assembly shall introduce a finance bill in the National Assembly. Any of the recommendations made by the relevant committee of the National Assembly or adopted by the National Assembly on revenue matters shall A, ensure that the total amount of revenue raised is consistent with the approved fiscal framework and division of Revenue Act, take into account the principles of equity and ease of collection, consider the impact of proposed changes on composition of the tax revenue with reference to the direct and indirect taxes, consider domestic, regional, and international tax trends, consider the impact on development, investment, employment, and domestic growth, take into account the recommendations of the Cabinet Secretary and Article 114 of the Constitution, and take into account the taxation and other tariff agreements and obligations that Kenya has ratified, including taxation and tariff agreements under the community. The recommendation of the Cabinet Secretary in subsection 5F shall be included in the report and tabled in the National Assembly. A plain reading of Section 43 and 44 of the Act indicates that the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Economic Planning is required to submit a legislative proposal setting out the revenue-raising measures for the national government on the same day that he or she makes a pronouncement of the budget policy highlights and revenue-raising measures. This would seem to be at variance with the express obligation under the more recent Section 39A, which requires that the Cabinet Secretary to submit a finance bill to the House not later than 30th April every year, in compliance with the orders of the court in Okio Mtato Koiti versus Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, and 3 others. Take your seats, members. The nearest seat, Honorable Kwame, the nearest seat. Well done. That is the nearest you can find. Honorable members, in my view, a purposive interpretation to bridge the apparent conflict between the two provisions requires the application of established principles of statutory interpretation and reference to the practice, precedent, and conduct of the Cabinet Secretary and House since the court judgment was issued. Honorable members, it's a canon of statutory interpretation that when faced with conflicting provisions, preference must be given to a specific provision as opposed to a general provision. Additionally, the last-in-time principle, where the most recent addition to a statute is given precedence, of a provision that was enacted earlier should be applied. From my reading of Section 39A and Section 43 and 4, it is noteworthy that Section 39A specifically refers to the introduction, consideration, and passage of a finance bill. On the other hand, the provisions of Section 43 and 4 only generally refer to a legislative proposal. Additionally, Section 39A is the most recent addition to the Act and represents the most specific and current position of the House on the manner of consideration of a finance bill. Honourable members, the practice and conduct of the Cabinet Secretary and the House since the decision in Okiya Omtatah Okoiti versus Cabinet Secretary, National Treasurer, and 3 others, 2018 Kenya Law Reports, and the amendment of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 has been consistent. Notably, in 2020, the Cabinet Secretary submitted the finance bill together with the budget estimates on 30th April 2020. The bill was published on 5th May 2020 and was considered and passed by the House on 23rd June 2020. It was assented to by the President on 30th June 2020. The Cabinet Secretary presented the budget statement for the financial year 2021 on 11th June 2020, well after the publication of the bill. In 2021, the Cabinet Secretary submitted the finance bill together with the budget estimates on 29th April 2021. The bill was published on 5th May 2021 and was considered and passed by the House on 24th June 2021. The particular bill was assented to by the President on 29th June 2021. The Cabinet Secretary presented the budget statement for the financial year 21-22 on 10th June 2021, well after the publication of the bill. In 2022, on account of the general elections scheduled for August 2022, the Cabinet Secretary submitted the finance bill together with the budget estimates on 7th April 2022. This was on the same date that he presented the budget statement in the House. The bill was published on 8th April 2022 and was considered and passed by the House on 7th June 2022. In keeping with the provision of Section 39A of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and the new court judgment, the Finance Bill 2022 was assented to by the President on 21st June 2022. Honourable members, from the foregoing, it's clearly apparent that the Cabinet Secretary and the House have adhered to the letter of the orders of the court in Okiya Omtatah Okoiti versus Cabinet Secretary, National Treasurer, and 3 others, 2018 Kenya Law Reports, and Section 39 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012. This clearly signifies that Section 39A of the Public Finance Act 2012 is the operative provision with regard to the introduction, consideration, and passage of a finance bill. Honourable members, the third issue was with regard to the effect of the presentation of the budget statement on the consideration of a finance bill. Section 40 of the Public Finance Management 2012 requires the Cabinet Secretary to make a public pronouncement of the budget policy highlights and revenue-raising measures of the national government. In doing so, the Cabinet Secretary is required to take into account international obligations entered into under the East African Community Treaty. The House is aware that the East African Community Partner States have agreed to present and table their budget statements to their respective parliaments every second Thursday of June. It is largely a ceremonial exercise which, particularly in our case, does not take away that all documentation relating to the budget is required to be submitted well in advance of the presentation of the budget statement. Indeed, as members are aware, no question or comment is permitted during the presentation of the statement. As a budget-making house, we are seized of the estimates and the finance bill, latest the 30th of April every year. Save for compliance with the applicable statutory timelines, the House is left to its own devices on how to consider the budget documents submitted to it. The House is under an obligation to prioritize the consideration of a finance bill with a view of passing it before the lapse of the 30th June deadline imposed by Section 39A of the Public Finance Management Act 2012. It should not be lost to honorable members that the procedures of the House cannot be left to the whim of another arm of government. The House is therefore at liberty to prioritize consideration of a finance bill before or after the presentation of the budget statement by the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury. As I conclude, I note that the variance in the sections 39A, 43 and 4 of the Public Finance Management Act extends Standing Order 244C, which I gave rise to the point raised by the Honourable Member for Arieda. The Honourable Otienda Molo, EBS Senior Counsel MP. The Standing Order does not take into account provisions of Section 39A and the requirement for the submission and passage of the Finance Bill before 30th of April and 30th June, respectively, every year. Honourable members, having guided that Section 39A is the operative provision with regard to the consideration of a finance bill, I direct the Procedure and Rules and House Rules Committee to note the variance and include the standing order in the items earmarked for review when it next proposes amendments to the standing orders. In summary, therefore, honourable members, my guidance is as follows. Section 39 of the Public Finance Act 2012 requires the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury to submit the finance bill before 30th April every year and that the bill be passed before the end of the financial year on 30th June. The section governs the manner in which a finance bill ought to be introduced, considered, and passed by the House. 2, it is a canon of statutory interpretation that when faced with conflicting provisions, preference must be given to a specific provision as opposed to a general provision. Additionally, the last-in-time principle where the most recent addition to a statute is given precedence over a provision that was enacted earlier should be applied. Section 39A of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 specifically refers to the introduction, consideration, and passage of a finance bill and represents the most specific and current position of the House on the manner of consideration of a finance bill. That the Cabinet Secretary and the House have consistently adhered to the orders of the court in Omkio Mtata, Okoiti, versus Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury, and 3 others, 2018 Kenya Law Reports, and Section 39A of the Public Finance Management Act 2012. This clearly signifies that Section 39A of the Public Finance Act 2012 is the operative provision with regard to the introduction, consideration, and passage of a finance bill. That the House is under an obligation to prioritize the consideration of a finance bill with a view of passing it before the lapse of the June 30th deadline imposed by Section 39A of the Public Finance Management Act 2012. The House is therefore at liberty to prioritize consideration of the finance bill before or after the presentation of a budget statement by the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury. That the Procedure and House Rules Committee notes the variance between Standing Order 244 and Section 39 of the Public Finance Management Act and include the standing order in the items earmarked for review when it next proposes amendments to the standing orders. The House is guided accordingly. And allow me to thank the Honourable Otienda Molo for raising the issue so that we can give clarity on the matter going to the future. Thank you. Ordinarily we don't debate or comment on the ruling and direction of the chair. We will let it lie there. Honourable Otienda Molo, let the chips lie where they fell. Otienda Molo.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I actually just wanted to thank you.
Okay.
But in so doing, I wanted to let the majority leader know, because when we raised this matter, he threw words as he usually does, alleging that I was part of the case that you've actually alluded to. So I wanted him to know that I was not part of the case and I was not aware of it. But Mr. Speaker, secondly, I take your guidance, and I think the House Business Committee and the House Rules Committee should take your guidance very seriously. We have amended our standing order twice since that decision of the court on 6th of June 2020 and 7th of June 2022. This should have been factored. But last, Mr. Speaker, because the Speaker is always right. Mr. Speaker, I urge that the House Rules Committee, in considering your guidance, do actually consider the fact that although the decision says that the matter must be published and introduced, it does not say it must be debated before the budget. I want to suggest that it would be in order to have the budget, then the contents of it are then debated in the finance bill. That is, not to bring the second reading before the budget, so that the budget is heard, then we have the second reading, which is the debate, then we move logically, Mr. Speaker. But lastly, Mr. Speaker, I do now have a point of order on the next business, which is order number 13.
Order, Honorable Tiende. Order, Honorable Tiende. You are certainly taking unhelpful shortcuts. Honorable members, I will not allow you, Honorable Bandi. I have given order, Honorable Bandi. This matter was raised by Honorable Tiende. I've bent backwards to allow you to make a comment, and I have thanked him for raising a matter that goes to align the Act with our standing orders in the next review. You will present your views to the committee when it meets. Honorable members, before we go to the committee of the whole, I want to invite the majority leader to move a procedural motion on the sitting time. Thereafter, I'll give you some guidance on how to proceed in the committee of the whole before we go into the committee. Majority leader.
Procedural motion, extension of sitting time.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, with your indulgence, because when you gave the Honorable Tiende Molo the right of reply, he did mention my name. Just to clarify to him that whatever I said, because it was not on record, was not in bad faith. Because I hear you severally refer to the Honorable Tiende Molo as senior counsel, and I expected the senior counsel he would be privy to matters that are in the courts. And therefore, ordinarily, senior counsel will know what issues are in the court, especially in court weighty matters, like that issue of the Omtata case, petition 253 of 2018. Honorable Speaker, allow me to move that pursuant to the provision of Standing Order 33A, this House orders that should the time appointed for adjournment of the House today, Tuesday 20th June 2023, be reached before conclusion of the business appearing under order number 14 of today's order paper, being Committee of the Whole House on the Finance Bill 2023, the sitting of the House shall stand extended until the conclusion of the said debate. And Honorable Speaker, I don't need to say much about this because, as you alluded, it's something we discussed in the House Business Committee, and the House Business Committee did direct that we have this procedural motion for today, tomorrow, and Thursday, as you have rightly communicated earlier. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move. Let me ask the Honorable Junet Mohammed to second.
Mr. Speaker, I stand to second, but seconding Mr. Speaker, as you said, or as you directed in the House Business, we discussed in the House Business Committee that there is a lot of business before us. But Mr. Speaker, Kenyans must know that members of Parliament are working. There are no other people in this country who sit up to midnight to do work other than members of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, many times members of Parliament are bashed outside there, that oh, they earn for nothing, they earn a lot of allowances, they earn this and that. These are the only people, Mr. Speaker, who sit up to midnight to do the business for this country, Mr. Speaker. And when we are sitting up to midnight, there is no allowance. We are doing it for free, Mr. Speaker, because we want to serve our country. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to beseech members to stay. There is a lot of food, I'm told, at the cafeteria. You can eat, you can drink a lot of water, and then those who have other business after house, they can suspend it for today until another day, so that we can conclude these financial businesses of the country properly, Mr. Speaker, so that Kenyans can have money in their pockets, if at all it will be. But myself, I doubt. But thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Junet. Honorable members, I propose the question, which is that, pursuant to the provision of Standing Order 33A, this House orders that should the time appointed for adjournment of the House today, Tuesday, 20th June 2023, be reached before conclusion of the business appearing under order number 14 of today's order paper, being Committee of the Whole House on the Finance Bill 2023, the sitting of the House shall stand extended until the conclusion of the said business. I now put the question. You want to contribute on this? Is it the mood of the House that we put the question? And now put the question. You can respond without drama. That pursuant to the provision of Standing Order 33A, this House orders that should the time appointed for adjournment of the House today, Tuesday, 20th June 2023, be reached before conclusion of the business appearing under order number 14 of today's order paper, being Committee of the Whole House on the Finance Bill 2023, the sitting of the House shall stand extended until the conclusion of the said business. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Will those of the contrary opinion say nay? Nay. The ayes have it. Honorable members, before we get to the committee, allow me to give some guidance on consideration of proposed amendments to the Finance Bill, National Assembly Bill number 14 of 2023. Honorable members, this communication relates to the business appearing under Order 14 in today's supplementary order paper, Tuesday, 20th, 2023, being Committee of the Whole House on the Finance Bill, National Assembly Bill number 14 of 2023. Before the House proceeds with the Committee of the Whole House, I wish to provide guidance relating to the consideration of the proposed amendments at the Committee of the Whole House. Honorable members, you may recall that on Thursday, 15th June 2023, after conclusion of second reading of the said bill, I did notify the House that members desirous of proposing amendments to the Finance Bill 2023 were at liberty to submit the amendments to the clerk in the manner provided for in the standing orders. Honorable members, Standing Order 133, procedure in Committee of the Whole House on a bill provides as follows with respect to the submission of amendments on bills. No amendment shall be moved to any part of a bill by any member other than the member in charge of the bill, unless written notification of the amendment shall have been given to the clerk 24 hours before the commencement of the sitting, at which that part of the bill is to be considered in the committee. In this regard, honorable members, at the close of the timeline prescribed in Standing Order 133-2, the clerk had received several proposed amendments to the said bill, originating from the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning, other select committees, and individual members. Indeed, as you may have observed, the notices annexed to today's order paper contain several amendments that have been proposed to the said bill. For certainty, honorable members, other than the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning, the following chairpersons of committees and individual members have proposed amendments. The Chairperson Select Committee on Delegated Legislation, the Chairperson Departmental Committee on Blue Economy, Water and Irrigation, the Chairperson Departmental Committee on Transport and Infrastructure, the Honorable Samuel Atandi, MP, the Honorable Ditmas Barasa, MP, the Honorable John Waluke, MP, the Honorable Dr. Undo Ojambo, MP, the Honorable Lesuda Naisula MP, the Honorable Mohammed Daud MP, the Honorable Jared Okello MP, the Honorable Caleb Amis MP, the Honorable Dr. James Nyikal MP, the Honorable Dr. Makali Mule MP, the Honorable Anton Oluoch MP, the Honorable Innocent Mugabe MP, the Honorable Wanami Wamboka MP, the Honorable Peter Kaluma MP, the Honorable Majimbo Kalasinga MP, the Honorable Robert Mbui CBS MP, the Honorable Caleb Mutiso MP, and the Honorable Geoffrey Ruku MP. Honorable members, as you may be aware, it is now an established practice under the Constitution that when considering any matter that has a financial implication on public funds, the House is bound by the provisions of Article 1142 of the Constitution. For clarity, Article 1142 of the Constitution provides, and I quote, if in the opinion of the Speaker and of the National Assembly, a motion makes provision for a matter listed in the definition of a money bill, the Assembly may proceed only in accordance with the recommendation of the relevant committee after taking into account the views of the Cabinet Secretary responsible for finance. Honorable members, under Clause 3 of Article 114, a money bill includes matters that contain provisions dealing with inter alia taxation, the imposition of charges on a public fund, the appropriation, receipt, custody, investment or issue of public money, and the raising and guaranteeing of any loan or its repayment. In this regard, a finance bill being one that deals with taxation is clearly a money bill. Honorable members, therefore, consideration of the Finance Bill 2023 squarely falls within the confines of Article 114 of the Constitution and other provisions relating to processing of legislation in the House. The provisions of Article 114 of the Constitution are also anchored in Section 39A of the Public Finance Management Act 2012, which states in part, and I quote, Section 39A, submission, consideration, and passing of finance bill. Any recommendations made by the relevant committee of the National Assembly or resolution passed by the National Assembly on revenue matters shall consider the impact of the proposed changes on the composition of the tax revenue with reference to direct and indirect taxes, consider domestic, regional, and international tax trends, consider the impact on development, investment, employment, and economic growth, take into account the recommendations of the Cabinet Secretary as provided under Article 114 of the Constitution, and take into account the taxation and other tariff arrangements and obligations that Kenya has ratified, including taxation and tariff arrangements under the East African Community Treaty. Additional honorable members, Standing Order 133.5 provides that no amendment shall be permitted to be moved if the amendment deals with a different subject or proposes to unreasonably or unduly expand the subject of the bill, or is not appropriate or is not in logical sequence to the subject matter of the bill. In this regard, I have analyzed the amendments proposed to the Finance Bill 2023 and noted that some contain proposals touching on matters listed in the definition of a money bill pursuant to the provisions of Article 114 of the Constitution. For the record, the amendments proposed by the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning are not part of those that I have isolated for guidance, as they were processed in the manner contemplated under Article 114 of the Constitution. Having applied my mind on various proposed amendments, I have determined that certain amendments are either similar to or they are fully accommodated by those proposed by the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning. In this regard, such amendments will be proceeded with in the Committee of the Whole House. On the other hand, honorable members, there are proposed amendments that, in my opinion, fall within the meaning of a money bill in terms of Article 114 of the Constitution. As you may have clearly noticed in the order paper, I directed the clerk to publish such amendments with a disclaimer subject to provisions of Article 114 of the Constitution placed under each of the affected amendments. As stated earlier, honorable members, whenever a motion or a proposed amendment is subjected to Article 114 of the Constitution, it's expected that such proposal may only be proceeded with if there is concurrence of the National Treasury through the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning. In the absence of the evidence that the affected amendments were processed in the manner contemplated in Article 114 of the Constitution, the Speaker is left with no option but to direct that the Committee of the House shall not consider any of the amendments or parts of amendments that have been published in the order paper with a disclaimer. Consequently, members should note that a member seeking to delete a clause need not have an amendment proposing the deletion of a clause. This is because a member is only required to raise and oppose a clause as published in the bill. This effectively enables any member to prosecute his or her opposition to a clause despite the requirements of Article 114 of the Constitution. Further, honourable members, I hasten to inform the House that all proposed amendments for which requirements of 114 of the Constitution do not apply are annexed in the order paper. Honourable members, a number of proposed amendments have since been received from 3 members, namely the Honourable Joshua Kandia MP, the Honourable George Sunguya MP, and the Honourable Basil Ngui MP, outside the time provided for in the standing orders. For clarity, Standing Order 1332 provides as follows.